Previously, we have built a ChatGPT Q&A bot to work with your own private data. We have the data in a local directory, and we built it with a conversational retrieval chain with Langchain. And finally, we implemented via the Gradio web interface. This time, we improved it. We implement the similar code with the Streamlit. And one of the biggest improvements we have done is now we're giving you the ability to upload your own files. So it can be interactive. You do not need to have it in your local directory. That means you can deploy this app anywhere and other users can use it, which is what we did. We deployed it via the Streamlit Community Cloud, and you can see this is a public URL you can interact with, and we still use the Langchain to ask questions over your own data. Now it took me a little bit over a week of work try to get this converted. It sounded pretty simple at the start, but it took me a lot of time for someone who has no programming background. So in this video, I will try to show you how I've converted the code. I will show you my approach and my thought process. Hopefully that will help you guys to learn as much as I did. So the main change I want to make is the data ingestion. Instead of having a local directory to provide your data, I need to be able to be interactive so it can be deployed as a proper web app. User can upload their own data. Now I chose Streamlit, which is another popular library or a platform just like Gradio to build demo app for machine learning and artificial intelligence. The reason I chose the Streamlit is the documentation seems a bit better, and with Gradio I was struggling try to build it with the file upload functions, which I found it is a bit easier with the Streamlit. And as you can see in the documentation here, it literally gives you all the code you need to build a ChatGPT-like clone. So we don't need to do that because we already built that part of the code from the previous video. But I did it anyway because it's very similar to our code, and I did want to experience and learn the Streamlit. So I've copied the whole code for this example. So if you scroll all the way down here, here you go. That's the full code, and you can try on your website as well. I've copied the whole code, which is just like ChatGPT. You query directly with the OpenAI model from here. So to build what we need, first thing is we're gonna bring the Langchain into here. So instead of query the OpenAI model, we're gonna use the Langchain to do the Q&A. And then instead of providing a path to local folder, we're gonna upgrade or we're gonna improve the data ingestion with a file upload function from Streamlit. Okay, let's see how we get that done. So if you have never used Streamlit before on your computer, you do need to follow its documentations on their website. And I use the Anaconda, but you can use any virtual environment you want. And also make sure before you run the code, you need to pip install your Streamlit library before we can use it. Okay. Before we dive into the Streamlit code, if you guys are interested in learn more, make sure you check out Misra Terp's YouTube channel, so as Part-Time Larry. Those two YouTubers have the best video I've watched so far explaining how Streamlit works, so make sure you check them out. Now let's have a look at our sample code. The code logic will be very similar to the one we have done previously. Now, st.title, this is just the way you call Streamlit functions. For example, this one will just display a title on the web app called GPT-like clone. Next, you can see we've imported an API key using st-secrets. Now, when you develop this locally, you need to have a secret file sits on your system. Make sure you check out the st.secrets documentation on the Streamlit website. But if you can't get it working, which I couldn't, don't worry too much. Just use your key directly. And when we deploy our app via the Community Cloud, I will show you another method that you do not need to have your secret files. Moving along, you can see this is how Streamlit defines the model you are using with OpenAI. The session state, there is a long article if you search here, explain what session state is. Basically, it's a variable that just records lots of stuff we need, including the chat conversation. So for example, session.session_state, st.session_state.message will be initialized as an empty list, and it will be used to store our chat conversation. Moving along, basically it says we're going to take user input as called st_chat_message, and then you have the model response as the assistant. And here it's basically taking all the messages from the list and querying the OpenAI model. And you can see the message response how will be added as a delta, and eventually all the messages get appended into the st.session_state.messages. So this is how you also give your ChatGPT the short memory when during the conversation. You can run your code here as an example without actually implementing it. So we're going to use this base code and modify it with our Langchain logic. So instead of querying the model directly, we're going to use a Langchain to do that. And then we will provide the data ingestion in a local folder first. Then we will use a file upload widget from Streamlit to replace that data ingestion part with the interactive upload. Before we dive back into the code, let's refresh our memory on architecture. So what happens here is you will upload your own private data and they will be converted to embeddings. Users' question, the input, will also be converted to embeddings. And then based on the user input, there are relevant chunks of data from your vector store will be extracted. And together, they both will be passed on to the language model. So remember, there is a system role message in GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. So for Langchain, what happens under the hood is it's telling the model under this system role message that you are a helpful assistant and you will only answer questions based on the context you were given. And if you do not know the answers to the question, say, I don't know. Do not make stuff up. So that's basically it. If you dig into the documentation for Langchain, somewhere you can actually see for each chain what the system raw message is. So together with this question embedding and the context embedding, we are sending them to the large language model and instruct it to give responses only based on the context. Let's also have a look at our previous code with Gradio again. As I explained before, that the logic is pretty much the same, and we're just gonna switch it out with the Streamlit and with a bit of interaction for the user upload. So looking at our old code, first of all, we defined our model, which will be exactly the same in the new code. Now we have a directory loader which will load all the files from this local directory. Now this bit will be changed because we want the user to upload it within our web application, so it's interactive. We are not looking for any data in any local folder. Then once we got the data, they will be split, they will be converted to embeddings. So as you can see, the only main difference and main improvement we want to make is this data loading stage. We want to change this static data loading to the interactive user upload within the web applications. Once we got the data, the rest of the pipeline is the same. We'll feed to chunk them and convert to embeddings. We will use the same conversational retrieval chain. And here it's just cosmetic difference. Instead of using Gradio, we'll be using the Streamlit. And again, the core code is the same. We will start capturing the user input, which is a question, and we are passing the model with the chat history, a bit of context as well. There will be a global variable that started with empty list and will be initialized. And every time the model responds, you will append the questions to the history, which you can see here, and you will also append the last question's answer to the variable. So eventually you will have this list of multiple turns of the user questions and model responses being accumulated and keep passing back for the next question to provide a bit of context. On the left is the full code, and on the right is the previous code with Gradio. So I'll have them side by side so we can compare them as we go through the code. Now, unfortunately, the final product, as you can see, has become quite complicated, a bit longer than what we had on the right after a week of work. So I try my best to explain to you guys what's going on here. As I said before, the logic is pretty much the same. It became more complicated because of some cosmetic change. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of coding experience, so I will not be able to explain to you line by line and code live in the video. But I will do my best to explain how I came from this code on the right to the one on the left. When I was working on my code, I started from bottom up. When you think about the logic, there are really two parts to the whole code. The top one is the data ingestion. We're gonna change it from a directory to a user upload in the web app. And the second part, the bottom part, is the ChatGPT code. Right, so I start in the bottom by converting from the Gradio to the Streamlit. Now this part of the code, ignore the else in the bottom, I'll explain that later. That's pretty much the same as the example code on the right. Okay, so we all started with initializing the global variable, which is session state message. And then we'll take the user input as a prompt. Now this is just a label. You can see on the UI that in the text box it says ask your questions. We grab user prompt, and then instead of doing all this OpenAI thing here, we are using the QA chain, Langchain to query by sending our prompt, and also for the messages inside session state message, which it starts with blank, but every time you get an answer back, every turn it will be appended to this global variable, and eventually it builds a context. Okay, and when it's displayed, so this with chat message, we will display the prompt using Markdown, and we will also display the response, which is the response equal to the result or answer. This is how you get response, the answers from the Langchain's response. And we also display as Markdown. Now I had a print here. This will only print not the full response. Actually, this will only print the response from that turn, from one question. And if you maybe do another print here, let's print the prompt here, and you can print the response here. So as you troubleshoot, you can see how it builds up every question and every question's answers. And if you print your session state message, you can see it will contain, so you can do another print here if you want. Eventually you will see session state message dot message. So I need to do st here. So if you do all these three prints, you can see how the workflow works. You will have your question printed, you will have your response printed, and then this response and the question will be both added to the whole list session state message. And as you go on chatting with the bot, every time you will print a new question, you will print out a new response, and then when you print this one out, it will contain your previous questions, previous answers, and your next question. So this is how I troubleshoot. Next, let's keep working our way up. So the UI, the ChatGPT part is completed. Calling up, bring up here, we'll initialize the conversation retrieval chain, which is same as the previous code. You will doing the text splitter as well, convert them to embeddings. Okay, I'll explain these ones later. And keep moving up. So this is the critical part. So instead of we loading files from reports, we're loading from the user upload, as you saw at the beginning of the video. Now one thing I have simplified here is I'm not doing a directory loader to load different type of files. I'm only doing PDF at the moment, and I am able to do multiple files. Just had a problem with multiple formats with different loaders, so that's something for me to work on in the future. So let's have a look at the logic in this part. So let's have a look at this if statement. What does it do? Initially, when I complete my code, there was a problem. Every time I chat, the whole code gets run again, including uploading the files sorry, the files are already uploaded, but it just gets converted into embeddings every single time I ask questions. So I added this if-else statement, basically saying if the data is not being converted, let's do this. We're gonna convert it, everything, well, let's do everything under if. But if the data is already being converted, then we just need to load the chunks and load the vector store. And these data will be initialized and passed on to the rest of the code to do the Q&A. But if the data is not ready, you're going to do all that. So assuming the data is already uploaded by user, which is on top of the code, I'll show you a bit later, but those data are not processed, what do? We're going to initialize this variable, which is same as that one. And then we're going to load them. This is basically just get the file name, which you will see when upload, it actually displays the file name. And then we're going to use the unstructured PDF loader to load the file. This is just another print command, just tells you how many have been loaded for troubleshooting only. So this part is to load the documents into the variable, and then we will chunk the data using the variable that's being loaded, and then convert them to embeddings. But if it's already there, then we jump straight to the else and load them straight away. So it does not go through this convert to embeddings every single time. Now next, this line is probably the most important line of this new code, because this is what is making the difference, that instead of loading data from the static folder, we are using Streamlit's file uploader widget. And this is what's been displayed as the text. And we're saying it will accept multiple files, and we are only filtering PDF files for upload. Okay, so this is the one that gives you the widget on the web app that you can click browse files to upload. Now I added another widget called with sidebar, which will just place the upload section on the left side of the web app. So just to show you how easy to use the Streamlit app, just to show you how easy it is to use Streamlit, let me quickly get rid of this part of the code. Okay, so what it does is when we run it, it will show you a title, and it will show you, let's get rid of sidebar for now. It will show you the title in the web app, and also it will show you the file upload button. Okay, let's save the code and run it. To run it, just go Streamlit run and actual file name. Go enter. Let's see. So we're running, we have the title, and we have the file upload here. Okay? So come back to your code. Let's stop it, Control C. And I'm going to show you the sidebar, which will bring the upload section to the left. Let's indent that. Make sure you save it. And run it again. So we should still have the title on the top. And now here we go. Your upload moved to the left. To publish our web app and to make it available everywhere, you need to sign up with the Streamlit Community Cloud. They have a very good documentation, so you just follow them and set it up with your GitHub. Once that's done, we need to get our GitHub repository ready before we can deploy it. So let's have a look at that. Go to your GitHub. You can see this is the one I already did. Now let's do a new one. Go new to create your repository. Let's call it Chat with Langchain. Make sure it's public repository and then go create. And this will give you a URL which you could use. Not only they actually give you everything you need to do. Alright, so you're gonna do your git init on your code, and then you can add a readme, do your first commit, and eventually you're gonna push all your files. Once your local folder be initialized, you will push all the file in that folder to this URL, which is your URL. And you can do all that in your VS Code. But our app is very simple, basically just one file, one Python file. So we're not gonna do all this fancy stuff to push it. All we're gonna do is gonna add a new file. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a new file, or you can upload existing ones. So if we do upload existing one, just gonna drag your file to here. Found my file, I'm just gonna drag it here. And I'll commit it. You can add a comment if you want. So this is our main file. And then to make it a successful deployment, you have to add a README file. Sorry, you have to add a requirements file. Okay, so it's just called requirements.txt. You can use a command called piprec to create that automatically. So this command actually will create requirements automatically based on your code, but what I found it didn't work. It didn't grab all the modules I need. And I didn't remember all the modules I have used, because in VS Code you just install them here. I don't leave them in the code. So I had a bit of a problem deploying, but that's because I did not have the full requirements. And most of the time, when you have problem deploying your app via the Streamlit Cloud, that is the reason you did not have your requirements.txt correct, set it right. So you can see this is our code, the same code we went through. And remember, I had a problem doing that using the ST secret, and I said, do not worry about that. We're just gonna use your API key directly when we test it. Now when we go deploy, we're gonna remove this line. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this line called OpenAI API key equal to ST secret. Okay, so this is what we're gonna use. Let's commit that. Updated API key. And I'm gonna show you how we're gonna import that in the deployment. So this is our code. Oh, hang on, this is not our code. Let's copy the whole code again. We can do this, that's fine. And just remove that line and a commit. And I'll show you what's in the requirements. This is all the modules we're gonna need for our code. Now you can do a equal specific version. I didn't, which means when you deploy via the Streamlit, it will just install whatever is available with the latest versions. Now you have set up your Streamlit Cloud. Let's go to the portal share.streamlit.io. I've logged in with my GitHub account, so that's how I linked it. This is my current app, which you saw at the beginning of the video. Let me just do another one. so you guys can see how it's been done. You're gonna select your repo, which is the new one we created, chat with Langchain. The app name, if you remember, is that. So we'll change this py to test the actual file name. Now here you can change your URL, make it a bit easy to remember. I'm just gonna delete all that. Now before we click on deploy, you come to the advanced settings. You can pick your Python version. I select 3.10, and this is where the magic happens. Remember, when we try to develop locally, you're gonna have a secrets.toml file locally. Well, that didn't work for me, but here it works quite nicely. So we've already changed the environment variable in our code, and all you're gonna do here is open your API key and leave your actual API key here and go save. And make sure this matches in your code that you reference your API key. So environment variable, you're gonna have the same reference here. Okay, so you're gonna have this line in your code, and back in the deployment, you're gonna have OpenAI API key right here. Now we can click on deploy. So I don't know how Streamlit works, the Streamlit Cloud works in the backend. Apparently it got everything figured out. All you need to do is provide your code in the GitHub repository with the requirements and just click on deploy, and it will be deployed to the Streamlit Cloud. And you can see when you click on this manage app down here, it just shows you the process, and it will also show you the error if you have any. This is just so much easier to make your code production ready. It took about 5 minutes. Looks like the code has been deployed, and you can see this is our new code. Chat with Langchain on its Streamlit domain. There's no obvious errors here. Looks like the code is running. Let's minimize that, and let's try it. So we'll upload a Google and Apple 2 document just to demonstrate it supports multi-doc. Now you realize only after data is uploaded and the process to convert to the embeddings, the chat window will appear. And this is, we designed that way. Otherwise, you're just gonna ask questions that you're not gonna get answers. Okay, so let's say, hi. Now let's ask a question that is not in the context. Based on the provided context, user question is not clear. Okay, that is a bit blunt. Who is the US president in 2020? I don't know. Okay. Now let's ask a question about our context. How did Google do in the last quarter? Ask that. Google services, right. Now, in my previous demo, as you saw on the beginning of the video, I did not have these writings. The app has encountered error. The original message was redirect to prevent data leaks. First, click on Manage Apps. Okay, I might have a problem with at line 98, how it's been displayed. Okay, but let's move on with the demo, and we can fix the code later on. And also the link in my description, that code is fully working. Should not have this display message. It looks like something to do with a markdown in line 98. somewhere there. Oh yeah, because I had this extra print message, which I didn't have in my first code. That's fine. Let's go back to our demo and ask a question about Apple. Can you highlight Apple's earning to bullet points? And that should give us a nice bullet points of Apple's earning. Here you go. Okay. So this is how you build your ChatGPT with Langchain that will answer over your own file, and also deploy it to a public cloud via Streamlit to make it available everywhere. Thank you for watching the video. In this tutorial, we took our previous code, Langchain with Gradio and ChatGPT, we've modified it with Streamlit, and we also published it via the Streamlit Community Cloud. The biggest change we've made in this code is now with the data loading, instead of doing via a static folder, we made it interactive and the user can upload within the web app. So it makes it truly a production app that you can use it anywhere. On the other hand, when I say production ready, it's not quite, because with Streamlit, it won't be able to handle large queries. It's not scalable. So you probably need to speak to Streamlit about their different pricing and the scaling strategy. If you are working for enterprise, you will probably do it differently. You will publish your app via AWS or Azure. You're going to speak to your DevOps team to get all the moving parts aligned. There will different resource groups need to be created, different app services. It's a much more complex task. But for our demonstration purpose, Streamlit worked perfectly. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching the video. In this tutorial, we have taken the previous codes, Langchain with ChatGPT and Gradio, we updated it with Streamlit, and we also published it via the Streamlit Community Cloud to make it available on the web. And the biggest change we have made is to, instead of loading the data from a folder, now user can upload it within the web app to make it just truly available everywhere. People can use it. Now, it's production ready, but it's not very scalable. You're either going to talk to the Streamlit team how to different pricing, how to upscale it, or if you work within a company, you're not going to do this way. You will probably publish it via AWS or Azure. You're going to speak to your DevOps team to get all the moving parts together. There will be resource groups, app services. It's a much more complex task. But for our demonstration purpose, this served us great. And the other things I could have done, I should keep working on, such as streaming the response and support multiple file format other than just PDF. Okay, so that's it. I will see you next time.